Journal entry number 3. Forgetting as fertile ground. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately forgotten why you went there? You stand for a moment, surrounded by perfectly ordinary furniture, hoping that something will remind you. The desk? No. The window? Probably not. The half-finished cup of tea? Unhelpful. So you return to where you started, and somehow the missing thought comes back. Of course, that was it. Forgetting can feel like a small betrayal. We trust the mind to carry something for us, a name, an idea, a sentence from a book, the reason we entered the room. And then, at precisely the moment we need it, it disappears. Perhaps that is why forgetting feels especially discouraging when we are learning. We spend an evening reading. We underline important passages. We nod thoughtfully. We close the book feeling that something meaningful has entered our lives. Then, a week later, someone asks what the book was about. And suddenly, nothing. A title, a vague impression, perhaps the memory of a particularly nice cover, but the ideas themselves seem to have dissolved. Was the reading pointless? Did we fail to pay attention? Are we simply bad at remembering? Or is forgetting doing something more interesting than we realize? We often imagine learning as filling a container. Information enters, information remains. The fuller the container becomes, the more knowledgeable we are. It is a simple picture, but the mind does not seem to work quite like that. Memory is not a storage box where every idea remains exactly where we placed it. It is more like a path through a forest. The first time we encounter an idea, the path is faint, perhaps barely visible. If we never return, the plants grow back. The ground becomes difficult to recognize, and eventually, it may seem as though there was never a path there at all. But when we attempt to remember, when we return to the idea without immediately looking at the answer, we walk that path again. We clear it. We make it easier to find next time. The effort of remembering is not merely proof that learning happened. It may be part of how learning becomes stronger. That raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if forgetting is not always the opposite of learning? What if forgetting creates the conditions that allow learning to deepen? Because when an answer is completely fresh, recalling it requires very little effort. We have not really searched for it. It is simply still present. But after some time has passed, the answer becomes less available. We have to reconstruct it. We search for fragments. We remember part of an example, a phrase, a connection. We may get some of it wrong, but during that struggle, the mind is doing more than recognizing information. It is rebuilding access to it. There is a strange difference between recognizing and remembering. Recognition says, "Yes, I have seen this before." Remembering says, "I can bring this back without being shown." The first can feel wonderfully fluent. You reread a page and everything appears familiar. You recognize every sentence. Nothing feels difficult, and because nothing feels difficult, you assume you know it. But close the book and try to explain the idea aloud. Suddenly, the confidence changes. The familiar sentences are gone. Now the idea has to stand on its own. Perhaps that is why rereading can sometimes create the feeling of learning without the durability of learning. The page is doing part of the remembering for us. Once the page disappears, we discover what remains. This is not an argument against rereading. Some things deserve to be read many times. A poem, a difficult argument, a paragraph that opens differently depending on who we have become. But perhaps rereading becomes more useful when it follows an attempt to remember. Before reopening the book, we might ask, what do I recall? What was the main idea? Which example stayed with me? Where did I disagree? What would I say if I had to explain this to someone else? Even an incomplete answer matters, especially an incomplete answer, because it shows us where the path is faint. There is an idea in learning research sometimes described as retrieval practice. The principle is simple. Trying to retrieve information can strengthen our ability to retrieve it again. Not merely rereading the answer, not simply highlighting it, actually attempting to bring it back. This may involve answering a question without looking, writing a short summary from memory, explaining an idea aloud, or pausing at the end of a chapter and asking, "What did I just learn?" Simple questions, surprisingly uncomfortable, because they expose the distance between familiarity and understanding. Highlighting is kinder to the ego. A beautifully marked page gives the impression that something serious has happened, perhaps in yellow, sometimes in 3 different colors. But the page may be more organized than the mind. A notebook can become full while understanding remains thin. Collecting information is not the same as being able to use it, and remembering is not created by decoration alone. Still, I wonder whether we judge ourselves too harshly for forgetting. We expect a single encounter with an idea to be enough. We read something once and feel disappointed when it does not remain permanently available. But perhaps forgetting is not evidence that the first encounter failed. Perhaps it is simply an invitation to return. Not to repeat the experience exactly, but to meet the idea again from a slightly different place. The second encounter is not the same as the first. We notice different things. We bring new experiences. We ask better questions. The idea begins connecting with other ideas. Slowly, it becomes less like something we read and more like something we can think with. Some knowledge should perhaps be allowed to disappear. Not every fact needs permanent residence in the mind. We encounter far more information than we could ever retain. The mind must let go. It must choose. It must compress. Perhaps forgetting is part of how we discover what matters enough to revisit. The ideas we return to begin shaping us. The others fade. Not because they were worthless, but because attention is finite. A journal, then, is not merely a place to preserve everything. It can be a place to notice what keeps returning. Which questions refuse to leave? Which ideas appear in different books, conversations, and experiences? Which thought remains alive even after the exact words have been forgotten? Maybe that is a deeper form of remembering. Not remembering every sentence, but allowing an idea to change the way we see. There are books I can no longer summarize clearly. I've forgotten the chapter titles, the examples, sometimes even the names of the characters, and yet something from those books remains. A question, a shift in perspective, a phrase that changed how I noticed the world. Perhaps the book is no longer present as information. Perhaps it has become part of the reader. So what does it mean to remember a book? Is it being able to repeat its contents? Is it recalling the author's exact argument? Or is it noticing that, months later, we make a different decision because of something we once read? Maybe memory is not only what we can consciously retrieve. Maybe it is also what quietly changes our direction. There is something hopeful in that, because it means learning does not have to be perfect to be meaningful. We will forget. We will confuse details. We will return to old notes and discover ideas that feel completely new. Sometimes, we may even find something written in our own handwriting and think, "That is remarkably insightful. I wonder who wrote it." Forgetting can be humbling, but humility is not a bad companion for a learner. It keeps us returning. It reminds us that understanding is not an object we acquire once. It is a relationship we maintain. Perhaps the goal is not to defeat forgetting. Perhaps the goal is to work with it, to leave time between encounters, to attempt recall before reopening the source, to revisit important ideas, to connect them with experience, to write not only what the author said, but what the idea made us wonder. Each return adds something: a clearer path, a stronger connection, a new layer of meaning. Maybe forgetting creates space. Space for effort. Space for rediscovery. Space for an idea to become more than something temporarily held in the mind. The ground may appear empty, but empty ground is not always barren. Sometimes it is waiting for us to return and plant the idea again. This time, a little deeper. So the next time you forget something you were trying to learn, perhaps you need not immediately call it failure. Pause. Search. See what remains. Then return to the source. Not as someone beginning from nothing, but as someone strengthening a path. That's today's entry. I'd love to hear what this idea brings to mind for you. Is there something you once forgot, only to understand it more deeply when you returned? Until the next page, stay curious.